Well, good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. Welcome to January 2024 in the podcast. This is going to look a little bit different. I mean, how else can I basically give you a kickoff to 2024 and do kind of a review of 2023 without one, having my good friend Marc Glickman on here with me, but also letting him share some slides because he's got a lot of really cool information that he's going to share with us. And then I'm also going to have him talk a little bit about the successes and maybe even if you want the failures that we've seen in the LTC space, and then share kind of where we're at, where we're going, and where we're seeing the trends in the long-term care market space. So, Marc, I really, really appreciate you being on my kickoff podcast with long-term care. It's not only do I consider you an incredible friend, but an amazing peer of mine. I'll tell you, and you can give your bio if you'd like. But Marc is an actuary by nature. But I will tell you what I think of him more in lines of more of a sales and marketing friend because his brain thinks so much bigger than just numbers, and I love it. So good luck keeping up, but we're going to give you a lot of information in this awesome kickoff podcast we've got. So Marc, thank you very much.
Yeah, Angie, thanks for having me on. And I also have a lot of admiration for what you're doing here. I'm sure the audience appreciates so much the information that you're giving them on these podcasts. So again, thanks for having me on, and don't be a stranger. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or feel free to email me and reach out if you're interested in anything we're going to talk about with the long-term care markets today.
Awesome.
So do you want to start off by kind of talking about
Yeah.
2023? And
Yeah, let's look in the review mirror. Let's see what that looked like.
yeah, and we put together this presentation. I'm not going to go through every slide here, but I do want to show kind of some of the highlights. 2023, we were looking at it about a year ago and saying, what do we expect to happen? And how did we do with our predictions? And where do we see some surprises? So let's start with the topic that I get the most questions about, which is the long-term care payroll taxes. What's going on around the country with the payroll taxes? So let's do a quick update there first. This was the map that we showed last year, and you can see this is from Finseca that a lot of states have legislative activities going on related to long-term care. No surprise there because what do we have? Over 50 million family caregivers today. It's an epidemic. It's not going to slow down anytime soon. And as we know, the costs of providing professional care are just skyrocketing. So we see a lot of states like Washington, which in 2021 had their long-term care payroll tax, looking at something similar. How do we create a state program because the federal government is not stepping in to do anything about that crisis? How do we supplement our Medicaid, which is becoming underfunded? And they see the writing on the wall in a lot of states. So I would say California is the most active state. So let's take a look at what did we get right with our predictions last year. Well, the California did a feasibility study and they priced it, and no surprise, it came out to a very similar payroll tax as what Washington had. They have 4 to 5 different options, so they're looking at more comprehensive plans at a higher cost. But the reality is they're slowly going down the road of legislation. We don't necessarily think it's going to happen this year during the election year. However, we'll know probably by the end of February or March if there's any pending legislation that they're going to start talking about. So probably 2025, but we'll wait and see. New York and Pennsylvania were other states that had bills that were put into their legislature to see if they could pass a long-term care payroll tax. And this was not too surprising either. It looked like in Pennsylvania in particular was kind of a political stunt a little bit, but nothing really moved forward there, and they kind of kicked the decision down the road. So we don't know if they're going to do a payroll tax. Not a surprise either. A lot of the brokers in the market acted quickly, maybe some would say too quickly, by saying you got to get your policy before this payroll tax. It's not, don't panic. Don't make your clients feel pressured either. We had a lot of people we were talking to, especially on the group side, HR directors that were saying, I had this broker come in and said I had to put this in before January 1st, or we were going to miss out on, being able to offer this, which is not true. And so we saw a big broker push, which also led more carriers to bring in new products. So here's the silver lining is that we always had a supply issue in the last 15 to 20 years with long-term care, right? Carriers exiting the market, not a lot of new solutions. In the group market, we're seeing huge growth because there are new carriers getting into that market. There was probably one LTC filed rider as of last year. By the end of this year, we expect there's going to be as many as 10.
Oh, wow.
That's just how big it's growing. So, and more people are going to get awareness through their employer at younger ages. So we'll talk about the implications of that. Where are the surprises, though? Well, didn't expect this to happen, but I guess it makes sense with all the brokers pushing this and even some carriers saying some things that were not fully accurate. California Department of Insurance sent a letter to every agent in the state saying, if you do talk about a payroll tax that is not existent, we will fine you. I think it was $25,000 for an agent and $500,000 for a carrier per violation. So that kind of got everyone nervous about, okay, maybe we need to take a step back here. So I actually
Tighten
say
the lips a
kudos
little
to
bit.
California for doing that because it was getting pretty ridiculous
Yes,
out there.
it was.
Some other surprises. We thought that Washington was going to check to see if people actually owned the policy so they could opt out of the payroll tax. Nope. They decided they were not going to recertify. And here's another big surprise. Despite the fact the state said they weren't going to check back on their coverage, most employees still kept their policy.
Oh, good.
Okay, we were thinking, everyone's going to drop these policies as soon as they have the option. Why are they paying for something they don't understand the value of? Momentum is very powerful.
Good.
And one of the anecdotes on the group side is when people are auto opted into their 401k, I've heard as many as 90% plus people do the match, right? Because they've opted into it, but automatically. People that are not auto opted into their 401k, maybe as few as 10% of people do it. That's the power of just auto enrolling and momentum and people not dropping, the way they've done it. So the same thing is happening with long-term care. Once people buy a policy, a lot of times they just keep it, especially if it's a low-cost policy. Why not, maybe I'll need this later on. A few other surprises. Massachusetts also jumped into something like California. They're looking at a feasibility study, and a few other states we're hearing about that as well. Maryland, I heard about today. So I think you're going to see state by state more looking at studies of this. We'll see if they look at actual legislation or payroll taxes. And then California, Medi-Cal, that was another shocker to me, is they actually dropped the entire asset spend down limit. Everyone in California can get Medicaid. It's bizarre as to how you were going to fund that, and there was no press on it either. It was a very silent thing that happened. But as of 1/1/2024, there is no Medi-Cal spend down limit. So just some crazy stuff happening out there in the market. I wanted everyone to be aware of. But let's talk about where we're going and a little bit more about the long-term care insurance market, right? We were looking at products from traditional long-term care to life insurance hybrids, meaning that they have a long-term care rider on a life insurance policy. We have a category we call alternatives, which ranges from short-term care, which is like an alternative to traditional long-term care, but a 1-year type of plan, to annuity-based products. We're seeing some innovation with annuity long-term care. And then, of course, the worksite and group long-term care market is exploding in popularity. So first, let's look at what we expected here. We expected that those life hybrid products were going to start to get very competitive pricing wise because interest rates were going up, and we saw that happen. We saw carriers dropping their rates, and we're still seeing it, right? I heard Lincoln, recently just reduced their rates. Every single extension rider hybrid product has become much more price competitive to compete for market share, which is great, right? Great for consumers, great for us. Alternative solutions also are growing in popularity. They're still under the radar a bit, but you have to look into that, those other markets like annuities and like short-term care, and you'll find that people that have health issues, guess what? They have an option now.
That's right.
And if you're not really plugged into that, if you're thinking long-term care is traditional long-term care, you may miss the boat. You want to make sure that you at least get some information about those other products because we're seeing great use cases and really happy clients from this. And as we talked about, your worksite markets are continuing to grow. I estimate over 300,000 Americans this year are going to get their long-term care through their employer.
Wow.
If you look at the individual side, and we're looking at, broadly, it's probably a similar amount, but on that traditional and extension rider side, it's only about 60,000. So there's like 5, maybe closer, going to be 10 times more people soon that are going to get their first long-term care policy through their employer. We're also seeing that now associations are allowed to offer to their members a group guaranteed issue long-term care product as long as the member is actively at work. So we're going to see some large associations this year, and Buddy's actually working with a lot of them. That's how we know firsthand. They're going to start offering this to their members, which comprise hundreds of thousands and maybe millions of Americans will have access to guaranteed issue long-term care focused products. So if you're looking for like, where is the growth happening? I would say look at the group market versus the individual market. We're also seeing that caregiving is becoming such a big issue that now we're looking at solutions to help the family caregivers. And guess who our clients are when they're buying long-term care insurance for a plan? They're usually caregivers, right?
Mhm.
So we're able to bundle an insurance solution and a caregiving solution together, and we're not just an insurance provider, we're like a holistic LTC solution provider. So really important trends to kind of stay in touch with.
Mark, there was so much to unpack in
Mhm.
that conversation.
Yeah.
Anybody that kind of grew up in that traditional LTC space, I mean, they've got to be sitting here going, what some of this stuff that I mean, when you start saying getting their long-term care insurance from their employer on a
Mhm.
guaranteed issue, work site, group LT, I
Right.
mean, I'm sure some people are going, I'm going to have to re-listen to this. I'm not sure I actually heard correctly what Mark just said. I mean,
Yeah.
this is some really eye-opening stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just think about the best way to like summarize it is remember the market, 15 years ago, right? Where we had people buying traditional long-term care through their employer. That kind of became dormant for like the past decade.
Yep.
And we finally have products again, which are easy to implement, low cost, affordable products, no health underwriting, where people can again get a starter basic plan. So
And
that's the way to think about that.
I love that you just said that, right? Because I'm sure you've encountered some of them that are like, that's not a real solution. They're not buying enough benefit, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure you hear that, but we
Yep.
we all got to understand, right? We roll, then we crawl, then we walk, right? So
Right.
you got to kind of look at it that way as well.
You do. And you have to look at it this way too, which is people only buy long-term care once they're aware of the issue and of the need. And
Hmm.
what we're allowed to do is get access to these large audiences so we can educate them. So remember, long-term care is two parts. It's planning, education, it's insurance and funding.
Yep,
If you don't do both of that, you're not actually creating a solution for your clients.
correct. I love that.
So the employer market is creating the education and the awareness.
Right.
The solution set, to your point, is, well, we're educating them on the cost of care and we're showing them the gap. And here's the other thing about it is, if they buy a smaller plan, there's nothing that prevents them from adding on top of that an
Right.
individual policy too.
Right. Right. This isn't a Medicare. You can have more than one. You can add on.
That's right. And just like when we look at group life or group disability, what do people do? A
Mhm.
lot of times they get their basic plan through their employer,
Yep.
and then they add on supplemental coverage if they want to do more comprehensive planning. It's very easy to see that the long-term care market is headed in the same direction because that's
Mhm.
what the client wants. It's
Yep.
not what I want. I'm not, I obviously want people to get comprehensive coverage just like many of you do. The client wants something that they can start off with that's
Right.
low cost to get comfortable with it before they decide they're going to invest in something they're going to keep for the rest of their lives. Remember, they're making a big commitment, 30, 40, 50-year commitment here. Maybe they don't want to put down $200,000 until they've had a chance to pay $50 a month first. I
Yep.
think that's a fair thing to say. So
Completely agree.
a lot going on that market. Just some surprises. Interest rates may be coming down again. We didn't necessarily know that that was going to happen a year ago. That might also have implications for the insurance market, in terms of I don't know if they're going to continue to reduce their pricing, for example, on the life hybrids. We'll see how that goes. We are seeing flat sales in general for the individual life and extension rider space. And the reason for that is, again, you're looking at a much more affluent client base to afford it. That's kind of what it comes down to. We have a niche market that we're serving, and it's mostly the mass affluent. But the mass market, again, is not necessarily good in the price range of, $10,000 10 pay or $100,000 single premium, right?
That's
So you just have
right.
to be cognizant of it's not going to be every client you have that's going to be able to afford that.
Yes.
Some other surprises, groups, while they have a lot of products, they're not having as much success for groups that are under 1,000 employees. And the big reason why is that it's very hard to do all the education that needs to be done. and get the mind share of the employees. And the participation rates are still probably about 5 to 10%. 10% if you do a really good job and have an ideal group. So when you're thinking about, groups like that are 200 lives, 5% of that is only 10 people, right? And you're putting in a lot of investment and effort to get 10 people coverage. So the employer wants to have more engagement than that. So we are seeing a lot more going on with employer funding. And what that is doing is that is getting a base plan for everybody that's affordable for the employer to pay for everybody. And then everyone's participating. And then because they own it, they're looking at doing supplemental coverage, either from that group product or from the individual market. So we're seeing those markets kind of evolve. The carriers put out products they thought would be for like these voluntary groups. And they're finding that people are asking, can the employer pay for this a lot more often?
It does make, well, when you think about when people buy their benefits from their employer, right, there usually is some level of employer contribution.
Mm-hmm.
Group life at its minimum core, health insurance at its minimum core. I
That's
mean,
right.
so yeah, that does make sense. So would you say with that, are you seeing your groups are much, much larger size groups?
Yes, we have like it's an interesting dichotomy. We either have really large groups, and we're talking about, we just enrolled a group of 26,000 employees. We're enrolling some 20, 50, 100,000 member associations, okay, just with long-term care, focused products. And we're seeing smaller groups like 50, but where the employer is paying either a base plan for everybody or like an executive carve out and executive
Mhm.
level coverage and maximizing the guaranteed issue amounts or the simplified issue amounts. Either way you go, you're going to have success, but
Mhm.
in between, you can't. There's no
Yeah,
like tweener good solution there. And that's what most people are trying to do. They're trying to squeeze a voluntary solution into like a 200-person group, and they're not having success with it. That's
you're
that's
right.
the thing to avoid. Um, and then, interesting also is we talked about the California payroll tax. In Washington, we saw participation like 30 to 40% of people bought it through their employer because they had this limited window and the payroll tax was already passed and looming. In California, we're not seeing that high rates because consumers are smart and they're like, well, let me do my own research to see what this payroll
Mhm.
tax is happening, and it's not happening real soon. And so they're like, well, okay, I can wait and spend some time learning about this. I don't need to feel pressured to buy this. So yeah, interesting that even despite those tactics, maybe the employer brought the long-term care in, you still have to do the education. You have to talk about the value of planning in the products. You can't just talk about there's going to be a payroll tax and you need to opt
Mhm.
out because
Yeah.
it's not real. It doesn't exist and people know it.
Mm-mm. Fear-based does not work.
Fear-based selling does not work.
Nope.
So, I think those are kind of really the overall, kind of concepts. I know we talked about a lot of different markets. So I guess my advice would be for anybody listening to this that's trying to get more into long-term care is focus on a particular niche where you have the best opportunities from a prospect perspective. If you're working with benefit brokers, or if you're in the P&C market and you have commercial clients and you have groups where you can work with them, I would encourage you to look at the group market because that is where the growth is happening. But you do have to kind of figure out, okay, how do I get the employer to contribute? Because most people have groups, most brokers have groups that are going to be below 1,000 employees.
Hmm.
Okay, so that would be my number one priority if I were sitting in your shoes from a business perspective. And remember, that's going to allow you to acquire a lot more relationships and clients, not only for the long-term care, but also for your core business, right?
Right.
Outside long-term care. So
Right.
it's probably the best opportunity to acquire clients in long-term care than it's ever been that I can remember in the last 20 years.
That's exciting.
Yeah. On the individual side, if you don't have groups, that's okay. Let's say you're in the Medicare market. I would encourage you to focus on the growing markets that are alternatives because health issues are just going to cripple you when it comes to fully underwritten products.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yep, they're great products, but if only half of your people can get them, I would lead with a short-term care product if you're in a state that has short-term care, and then you
Hmm.
can kind of do more comprehensive planning on top of that. We
I
very
love that.
commonly are doing both traditional and short-term care together. They
Yep,
work actually well together.
you're exactly right. I even tell, I've done an entire presentation on selling long-term care insurance in reverse, which
Mhm.
is basically start with the short-term care, especially if you know the health. And then if there needs to be a longer period of time, move on into an LTC.
Yep. You got it.
So, Mark, we don't have a whole bunch of time, but I would love for you. I love the fact that Buddy INS and Benefit Buddy and all the resources it has, because in a lot of my agents that I work with, they're not LTC specialists, but they do have LTC prospects, and I love the concept of what Benefit Buddy can do for them. And I think it's worthwhile for you to spend a little bit of time talking about that resource that is available to them.
Absolutely. So we have something we call the buddy system, and it's really professionals helping out other professionals. So we partner with a lot of BGAs like Angie. We partner with a lot of agents. And the goal here is we built this suite of technology to make it easier to show your clients the value of long-term care to help with the planning process. So we don't care kind of who you're with in terms of, where you get your contracts. This is actually a system that you can either subscribe to, or we actually have a joint work model as well, where if you want an enrollment partner on the group side, where you need a team, we work with Angie and we work with you to figure out how do we help to facilitate larger opportunities. The way to get access to this is you can go to app.buddyins.com, or you can go just to our website, www.buddyins.com, and there will be a banner right across the top that will get you to this. And you can sign up for an account. I'm just going to log in with my email just to show you kind of what that looks like. It's going to give you kind of the subscription options when you sign up for your account. And just let us know if you have any questions about that. We also have a free twice a week study group. We have one study group for the individual markets on Tuesday, and we have one study group for the group worksite markets on Thursday. Most people that partner with us actually start off in our study group, and then they see kind of a lot of topics, and then of course they kind of graduate, I'll say, to accessing the portal. So just take this at your own pace. The goal, though, is to provide a lot of sales tools as well as education. So we have a whole variety of resources. We have a learning lab, so we have modules on all these different markets and these topics. You can go kind of video by video. We have a lot of marketing pieces that you can grab, and you can actually present sales concepts to your clients. We have all of our recorded study groups are in the sales section. You'll find over 100 trainings here. So more information on any topic that you're particularly interested in. So this is kind of a teaser. I know we only have a short period of time, but if you wanted to spend hours to going through this in more depth, you have those resources at your fingertips here. But the tool I wanted to show you today, which Andy alluded to, and she knows very well, she was one of our biggest supporters when I started this. Actually, it was about 7, 8 years ago now. I built this software
Hard to
program.
believe.
Yep, and I did it for one carrier for National Guardian Life, which at the time I was affiliated with. Now we're doing it for multiple carriers. And it allows you to kind of walk through the long-term care planning process. So when I click create a plan here, it's going to pull up our dashboard. And the first thing you're going to see is an interactive traditional long-term care on the left-hand side, hybrid long-term care on the right-hand side. And so what this shows you is what is the cost of the plan? What is the total premiums paid? What is your future benefits on the right-hand side? And what is your future total pool of benefits? But the key, insight that I had was what people care about is how much leverage am I getting from my insurance product, right? So for every dollar I pay, how many dollars of total benefits could I get? And I think the really surprising thing is just how robust it still is. When people say long-term care is expensive, they're allowed to move this dial down or up depending on whatever their budget is. But the key is, are they getting leverage? And the answer is yes. Hybrids as well. When we look at the life products that have the extension rider for long-term care, they offer almost as much leverage, in some cases more leverage than the traditional products do, right? It depends on a lot of factors, whether they're a male or a female, for example. And this is interactive, so you can change this. Let's switch this to a female. When you switch it, all you have to do is click the update button. It's going to recalculate all our numbers for us pretty quick. My hybrid has more leverage than my traditional product now, right? Because females are priced higher for traditional than they are for hybrids because they're life-based products. So again, you can kind of go into this and you can change a lot of the parameters. You can change the ages. You can change what we're projecting that future age to be, okay? You can change it from a recurring pay to a 10 pay. You could do a target premium approach here, right? So a lot of different interactive aspects to this. I'm not going to go through all of the details, but I will tell you that the most popular thing to do is to say, how do I walk my client through the long-term care planning process? Well, you might want to start with the cost of care. And we have the ability to show the cost of care here. So I'm going to update this. and let's take a look at what the cost of care looks like. Now, this is in the state of Texas, but you can just change your state here, and it's going to pull in that median cost of care from the Genworth survey. You can, again, plug in your future age, and you can put in whatever assumptions you want, what care setting you want to look at, whether it's a home health care, assisted living, or nursing home, inflation in the future. Let's say you want to choose 5% inflation for the future. And this is going to allow you to walk your client through what does that monthly cost of care look like in the future? What does that total cost of care look like in the future? So this is just a starting point. Now, the reason I show this first is that once you go back to the product, you can actually select cost of care here on the right-hand side. And after you've kind of gone through the needs analysis, you can compare, how does my product compare to the cost of care? My product has $17,000 a month. My cost of care that we just looked at was $25,000 a month. That means that we have an $8,000 gap. That's not a bad thing because this client is covering 2/3 of the cost, but it just helps them understand for that premium price point, if they go down or if they go up, just remember that you might have more that you'll have to self-fund. And it changes the conversation. It's not about whether I want to buy insurance or whether I want to self-fund. Everyone's doing both. How much insurance you want to buy is based on how good of a deal you're getting. How good is this leverage? So you can have this software up on your screen and screen share and allow clients to actually change different parameters so they can customize their own plan. And you'll notice there's no insurance company mentioned here. You might ask, well, what carrier is this? This is just a representative sample carrier, okay? Their pricing is going to be similar for a lot of the carriers that are in that same segment because they compete against each other, right? And their pricing tends to be relatively close. Whether it's 9 times or 9.3 or 9.6 doesn't matter.
Yeah.
What does matter is, what does the client want to spend? How much are they trying to buy? Once you know their parameters, you can go to your BGA, you can go to Angie and say, hey, run me a quote, but specifically I want it to look like this because I know my client, that's what they want to buy. And that's going to keep you from having to run a bunch of quotes and having a lot of time spent when really it comes down to a conversation you need to have where they're actually walking through this with you. And this allows you to really get them the plan that they're looking for.
I love this. It's needs-based selling. It's not selling. The insurance product is not the solution. It's the solution is solving the problem. And I love this because it changes the conversation. Instead of it being, can I see a quote because I want you to blow my mind at how expensive this is? Because when someone's asking you for an illustration, your antenna should go up immediately, right? So
Yep.
I mean, this speaks to even what Harley Gordon says, you have to develop that need. And that's exactly what this does, is it compares reality with what they want to spend and the leverage they're getting inside of the solution.
That's right. The other feature that I would say is the most popular is when you check this drop down, you'll see there's a fourth option, which is self-funding. So you can still do that comparison and say, well, how does this compare if I were to invest that money into a market-based account? You can plug in whatever rate of return you want. So if you want to put in 6% here, if you want to put in a capital gains tax, for example, on an investment, you can just rerun the numbers and instantly you can say, like, if you were to invest the money, you'd have 740,000 in your account, 120,000 of tax for 620,000 after tax. If you do the insurance, you'll have 1.3 million. If you don't use the long-term care, you have this death benefit and this cash value. So just side by side, really quick and easy, pretty intuitive concept. You can say, is it worth doing insurance? And they can just look at the numbers and decide for themselves. You don't have to be the one to say, like, you must do this. The client's going to be saying, I want to do this because I like the deal. The other thing you can do is you can also choose a funding source. So if you're working with a business owner, for example, whether it's a C corporation or an S corporation, if you know how long-term care taxation works, you can put in assumptions here. We'll do a hybrid here. So we'll say 50% of the premium is long-term care tax deductible, and where you can rerun the numbers. And this is going to pull up a projected savings tab that will also show you, here's your long-term care premiums that were on the left-hand side. Here's how much you save because of the tax deduction for a business owner, and your net cost is a lot lower. So again, talking about those concepts where you can add more value, you're working with business owners, that's a quick and easy one to say, this is a no-brainer. You're able to deduct this as a business expense, or it's like you're using pre-tax dollars to fund your long-term care and still get the benefits tax-free. So hopefully you see the value if you know long-term care. Hopefully this is helping you with that story that you're telling your clients, and then you marry that with the illustration. Bring in the illustrations, but bring it after you know what they want and you know that that final result is going to be what they're looking for.
Oh my gosh, Mark, I couldn't have planned a better kickoff to starting 2024 with long-term care. This is just so exciting to me. I want to encourage everybody, as you listen to this, if you're like, wow, I've got to know more about this. Of course, you can call me, you can email me. It's Angie@producersxl.com. But Mark, you probably welcome phone calls and emails as well.
Yeah, I would say the best thing to do is just go to our website, buddyins.com. There's a partner with us section, and there's a form there. So if you partner with us, just put that you're with Producers XL in the comments here, and then we'll reach out to you and give you more information if you want to learn more about the buddy system and the technology.
It's such good stuff, such good stuff. Well, I can't thank you enough for joining me on my first podcast for 2024. I look forward to it. I'm sure emails. I'm assuming that you're going to get a lot of responses from the website as well. So, Mark, I really appreciate the time. Thanks for looking back at 23, looking ahead to 24. I think there's good things out there. There's opportunities, there's potential, and you've definitely pointed those out. No matter really what distribution the agent's in, there's opportunities out there.
Absolutely. And thanks for having me on. And thanks to all the agents listening to this and the advisors. What you're doing for your clients is irreplaceable at the end of the day. So really appreciate all of you guys that going out there daily, day to day, helping your clients become aware of these issues.
I love it. Thanks, Mark. Have a great year.
Bye.
Bye.